A controversial former UNCW professor was found dead in his home today. Now the New Hanover County Sheriff's Office is investigating. Deputies were conducting a wellness check at Mike Adams' home and found his body. His cause of death hasn't been released yet. Adams was set to retire on August 1st after getting backlash for comments made on his social media accounts. Many saw the comments as racially insensitive and called for him to be fired.
One of the most outspokenly conservative professors in the United States died last week. There are not many. Mike Adams taught at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. He was direct about his views. Adams opposed censorship and thought abortion was wrong. He believed in facts. He believed in the historical record. Here's a clip of Adams describing what he thought of campus speech codes.
They consider this to be a political weapon for them to shut down speech that they can't rebut. I've got a definition, by the way, for hate speech. I think it's speech that the left hates because they lack the intelligence to rebut it.
It's one thing for a talk show host to say that, but you can imagine the response when a professor says it. For articulating his beliefs, Adams faced never-ending harassment. After he criticized the tyrannical behavior of the governor of North Carolina during the coronavirus shutdowns, thousands petitioned for his removal. And in the end, the mob won. The University of North Carolina, Wilmington forced Adams into early retirement. His last day would have been next week. Well, last week, Adams apparently shot himself. But it wasn't enough. The media continued to attack him. NBC News ran a piece entitled, "Professor Behind Vile Racist and Sexist Tweets Found Dead in North Carolina Home." That's real. BuzzFeed ran a story with this headline, quote, "A professor who was known for his racist, misogynistic tweets was found dead in his home." Imagine doing something like that, writing something like that about a dead man. They didn't think twice. That's who they are. And that's what they do to you.
You know, over the years, there have been a couple of organizations that literally paid people to watch this program and record it, every word, and then they would parse every word that was said and try to make it look silly if they could, leaving connectors out and put the words together. Then they'd pass it out and try to do everything they can to hurt us. They call that hate watch. Well, there was an outspoken atheist whose name was Mike Adams. He used to be among these groups. He just watched all by his own, but he cursed us. So this campus radical is here today. Take a look.
Mike Adams was praised as an atheist and liberal criminology professor at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. But all that changed when he became a Christian. In 2007, Mike sued UNCW for denying his promotion to full professor and hired the ACLJ to represent him in what would become a 7-year legal battle.
I've been an advocate for the First Amendment, telling people to stand up for their rights for years. I can't turn around and then duck and run.
In his book, Letters to a Young Progressive, Mike exposes the radical beliefs in America's universities and gives much-needed advice to conservative students on how to survive on campus.
Well, with us now is living proof that at least one conservative teaching at a college in America. Mike Adams has written a book he's called Letters to a Young Progressive and How to Avoid Wasting Your Life Protesting Things You Don't Understand. Mike Adams, good to have you with us.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
You were voted Teacher of the Year in your college, University of North Carolina in Wilmington, twice, 2 times. You were Teacher of the Year.
I was.
But they turned against you. Why?
Well, in 1998 and 2000, I was Professor of the Year, but then later on in 2000, I actually converted to Christianity. And I'll tell you something, Pat, it's the people who talk about tolerance and diversity the most often that are actually the most diametrically opposed to it. So I learned that the hard way.
Well, you know, I would think down in North Carolina, nice people down there in Wilmington, I have many friends at the UNC. It doesn't look like a hotbed of radical left. What's the deal?
Oh, it really is, because, you know, Pat, our universities don't serve the people.
Yes.
I mean, the professors come from all across the country, of course, and there are all kinds of leftist professors who would love to take a job at UNC Wilmington and work down there by the coast. And they come from everywhere, and they really don't serve the interest of the folks. And I know that. I used to be one of them, hired in 1993, and fortunately I snapped out of it.
Well, what did you believe in those days yourself?
Well, I had lost my faith in college, and I was a secularist, and it's funny. That's one of the reasons why I used to watch the 700 Club and just hurl profanities at people like yourself and Jay Sekulow, because I believed in all that stuff.
Well,
and
fortunately, I couldn't hear you.
Well, I drove up so you'd forgive me, Pat. I hope you'll accept my apology. But I believed in all that stuff, and I had a radical
What did you
secular
believe?
worldview.
What specifically did you believe?
Well, I actually was somewhat of a cultural relativist back then, and thought that we ought not to judge other cultures by the standards of our own culture. And, that collided with reality a few years after that. When I was on a teaching exchange in Quito, Ecuador, and I actually went into a prison, and I spent a few hours in there, and I actually saw, Pat, for example, a savage beating of a prisoner while I was in there. I mean, they club people in there and beat them severely and deny them due process.
They,
and,
as in the
system of
jailers,
justice, the system of justice in Latin America. They'll deny people trials for years for a misdemeanor. And I went in there and experienced that firsthand, and I realized, that's a worldview that doesn't make any sense. I mean, there has to be an absolute moral standard out there.
That was the thing. If you were an intellectual, you could say there's no such thing as an absolute. That was the big deal. And actually, one clerk of a justice, I think Justice Vincent, got that into the Supreme Court. As the Supreme Court, there's no such thing as an absolute.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
There you go.
Right.
But that worldview did indeed collide with the reality, and so that was just the beginning of my process of waking up.
What did they do to you once that became known that you were no longer a relativist?
Well, it's interesting. Later on, after I had an experience on death row, actually in Texas, I was interviewing a mentally handicapped prisoner there, and he actually quoted John 3:16 to me. And I realized I had never read the Bible, and I called myself an educated person. So I actually went into a study of Christianity. Lasted for about 9 months and had that conversion specifically to Christianity in the year 2000. And shortly after that, I started to criticize the university for its lack of commitment to ideological diversity and just the incredible ideological echo chambers that colleges have become. And also their strong antipathy towards free speech and religious freedom. And I actually started to speak out about it and eventually write about it on a column for townhall.com. And a few years later, when I went up for that promotion to full professor, the guy who had been counted as the, professor of the year 2 times by his university was judged to be deficient in every single area: teaching, research, and service. And so,
who made that determination?
Well, I had a radical Marxist chair of the department, and
Marxist in North Carolina.
Oh, you better believe it. And the entire department really is very left.
I'm shocked.
It's true. And so when that decision was made, then
who hired a Marxist to teach at that school?
Well, another Marxist. That's the answer.
So the faculty had taken over the inmates ran the asylum. So
that's been the case for a long time, certainly. And so when that decision came down, we had to decide whether we were going to fight. And fortunately, I had some good friends, including David French, who at that time was with the ADF. And we got together and we decided we were going to fight that thing, Pat. We had no idea that it was going to be a 7-year lawsuit.
Another person that you had mocked, Jay Sekulow, became your counsel.
Yeah, that's interesting because, David French had switched over to the ACLJ in the middle of the lawsuit. So it ended up being this joint effort. And so Jay was actually involved in my appeal. So, here I am 15, 20 years later after I used to curse this guy. I've converted, and now he's my lawyer. So,
well, did he win?
We actually had to fight that thing for years, going before the Fourth Circuit to actually win a jury trial. And 7 years after we filed the suit, we walked into a courtroom for a 3-day trial in North Carolina, and it took the jury less than 2 hours to return a unanimous verdict in my favor, and I won and got the promotion. So
you got it.
We won.
But they don't love you down there.
Not so much.
But you are, what are you now, a tenured full professor? Is that the idea?
I sure am.
So they can't mess with you anymore, or maybe they
well,
can.
They can try, but I've got some good friends now, so I'm ready to fight back.
Well, have you been able to gather people around yourself who share the same point of view?
Well, I find that a lot of the conservatives on college campuses, they just kind of stay in the closet now, and what they should be doing is using my legal victory to,
Sure.
to realize that you can, in fact, win. And the problem is, Pat, if all of the conservatives on our college campuses who are afraid of having something done to them, if they would all stand up, then they couldn't target individuals like myself. There are plenty, but they're just hiding. And it's time for them to step up.
Well, what do you tell young Christians who are going to college? Because, you know, you'd think college is supposed to be a big deal, but it's really a brainwashing session for most of these kids.
Well, they've got to be prepared. You know, I teach every summer at a worldview ministry now in Colorado called Summit Ministries. And we teach them worldview training, and that's something the church needs to do more often, and it's something that parents need to do, is to make their kids realize that ideas have consequences, and to go out there and systematically study worldview and learn how to defend their faith before they actually go off to college. That's the main thing they've got to do.
They're young, impressionable, 16, 17, 18 years old. They don't have any experience in the world, and suddenly they thrust into this icy bath of Marxism or radicalism or progressive thought or whatever you call it.
Yeah.
And whew, it's terrible to think about. Well, I'm pleased to report that we have a university right now that has close to 7,500 students, and we have 7 college presidents who have graduated from our school, and 800 teachers of the year. So we're making a difference, but I hope you'll be. Well, you're still down there in North Carolina.
I'm still down there. And,
I can't believe it.
Yeah. Well, I went through 7 years of litigation. I wasn't going to leave after the victory, so they're stuck with me now.
Well, Mike has got a book. It's called Letters to a Young Progressive. Mike, where do you get your book? Is it available?
You can get that, I think, here at your website and also at Amazon as well. Yes, indeed.
Right. You need to get this. I mean, Letters to a Young Progressive. I mean, it's tremendous. Mike, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Courage, brother. God
you.
bless you.
Deputies were conducting a wellness check at Mike Adams' home and found his body. His cause of death hasn't been released yet.
They didn't think twice. That's who they are, and that's what they do to you.